You stay there a couple of weeks, live with the people. It doesn't take long. You feel that weight coming off of you. Everywhere you look, you see Black people, you see Blackness, and that gives you such a good feeling of self. And that's what people from the Caribbean have. And we think they think they're better than us. No, they have a sense of who they are.
And I think my parents are Jamaican.
Oh, okay.
What I notice is that growing up in America is that when you see people in authority that looks like you,
Mm,
it gives you a different now Jamaica has classes very in colorism, very bad, right?
right.
But you still see people in authority that look like you.
Yeah,
When you're constantly seeing people in authority who don't look like
right.
you, it really messes with your psyche on a subconscious level. Because you don't feel subconscious you could be in that position because you don't see it consistently.
Right. Right.
I think that's one of the burdens of growing up in America as a Black person, especially back in the day.
Mhm.
You really typecast yourself because you don't, it's not even a thought for you to do that because you haven't seen it.
Right, right, right. Belly of the beast. Mhm.
What would an educational curriculum that truly empowers our youth look like?
So that was one of the successes of the Black Power movement in the 70s, was instituting Africana and studies programs in colleges and offering those classes, and then also infusing the curriculums in public schools. Now, for example, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago, a lot of those places, curriculums were designed to give Black children a sense of self, beginning with commit. That's a whole nother story, but that we're still fighting today. All right, to take children back to Egypt and tell them that this is where your civilization began, and these people were actually African people who did that, and then bring them up. And we Black scholars are accused of just trying to make people feel good. Yeah, we are. We're trying to make people feel good. When we go into the kings and queens of Africa, the whole pre-colonial African history, and then go into the enslavement, not only from by the Europeans, but also by the Arabs. We don't usually talk about the Arabs and their infusion, and the devastation. We look at the slave trade, we call it, but we don't really look at the devastation that took place in Africa. The population between 1500 and 1800 was almost, I want to say, it was more than halved, from the people being taken out. Not only people being taken out, but out and out genocide, the slaughters of thousands of Africans were just killed. So going through that, and then coming. I used to teach Black history all the time, and the students ask, "Well, isn't there a happy period?" Well, happy would be the Harlem Renaissance. That's about as happy as we can get. And even then, during the Harlem Renaissance, you still had a reign of terror going on. You got all these lynchings on the one hand, but at least you have all this art coming out of the Black community. So, this to really show the Black people in their full glory, that we can do all under. Can you imagine where we would be and what our lives would be like if we weren't oppressed?
Yeah, because going back to the slavery in Africa, right, or a destruction of Africa, I don't think people understand how systems to sustain a society were destroyed.
Mm,
That's like a big aspect. So
right,
this is like years and years of progress not being made because the system
right.
destroyed. Your brightest and your strongest are removed from that environment. The trauma that was left behind,
Mhm,
your ability to earn and develop is just decimated.
right, right. The best account, of course, would be Walter Rodney's "How Europe Underdeveloped Africa."
Facts.
And also, Eric Williams' "Capitalism and Slavery." And the funny thing about that, I guess it's not funny, Of course, he became the, prime minister of Trinidad, and during the Black Power movement, he had to ban his own book. Yeah,
Why? Who forced him to ban his own book?
he
Why?
had to
Why?
because it was too empowering, you know? Even though he had that consciousness when he wrote the book, but, as a governor, you want
Keep
you
everybody
you
else up.
you're trying to repress this Black Power thing. Yeah, he banned his own book.
Studying slavery, right? Um, so there's this idea like you're really not supposed to complain about your history. You're supposed to move on, right? But when you analyze even the slave ship and how traumatic that is, and like being disoriented because not only are you removed from your life, but like the crying, the feces, the beating, the death, even the food, being exposed to like foreign food, like it's just such like a mind blowing experience that people don't want to acknowledge or think about.
Well, it's changing a little bit now because now we're talking about trauma. And of course, Joy DeGroy, forgot her last name, Bleary, her book, The Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, which she was a little ahead of her time because we're just starting to get that way and looking at the impact of trauma, generational trauma on people. And and this is one of my inspirations for doing the Slave Revolt map because as a Black person, we are shrouded in shame. You're in a predominantly white classroom and you get to the topic of slavery and all the white students look at you, like you're still a slave. All that trauma is still with you. And I wanted to say, look what we did. Look how we fought. Look how we strategized. Look at the genius in all of this.
And I want to bring up, right? So when everyone talks about epigenetics, right? They just seem to focus on like the negative things we
Right,
inherit. But when I think about when I started to understand epigenetics, right? And say, yes, I may have inherited that.
right,
But what about all these other things I inherited? The
right,
resilience, the
right,
brilliance, the
right.
courage.
And that's what I put on in the narrative for the map, that the same DNA that ran through our ancestors is in us.
Right.
You know, we can do this. We are empowered. We need to know who we are. We need to stand up.